kind of weird to be in a theater with so many people and wonderful at the same time. I'm Morgan Pollitt. For those of you who don't know me, I think I know most people here. I'm an executive producer on Eminent Domain, and super excited to be presenting it here. This is the first time we're listening with an audience in any space like this. People have heard it. It came out on Audible on Thursday, but this is the premiere event. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna let Warren and Tori speak more to the creative process, but I just wanted to say a huge thank you to our cast and crew and everyone who helped support this process. The entire journey of this show is years from Warren's perspective. For mine, it's been about 18 months, and you know, a lot of things we navigated that we weren't planning for in the beginning, like COVID. And this was an interesting challenge in that when Warren first talked to me about this project, he explained explicitly that he wanted to record the actual action and be on location and do all of the things and not ever be confined to a traditional studio booth to record. So that meant, we'll show some pictures, but lots of interesting scenes of us running around in parking lots and playgrounds, and a huge shout out to Turquoise Trail Charter School, which is Warren's alma mater.
And Evans.
Yeah, let us kind of set up shop.
Any other coyotes in here? No. Okay.
But yeah, we used that as our home base and got real creative. So thanks everyone for being here. This has been such an amazing experience and just a true testament to, if you stay flexible and on your toes and just kind of ready to pivot and move with where momentum takes you, magical things can happen. So I'm gonna pass it on to our amazing writer, Tori Cárdenas, to do a land acknowledgement, and then Warren will speak to you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you, Morgan. So the definition of eminent domain is the right of a government or its agent to expropriate private property for public use with payment or compensation. For centuries, though, both Spanish and United States governments have employed genocide, ethnic cleansing, and forced removal against the original inhabitants of this place we now know as Santa Fe as a way to possess the land. They broke promises, they broke treaties, and because of this concept of eminent domain, the US government would have you believe that they provided fair compensation for this land. However, despite centuries of colonial theft and violence, this is still indigenous land. It will always be indigenous land. We are in Ogapoke, the unceded lands of the Tetsuge Owinge. This place is also part of a much larger sovereign landscape for indigenous peoples, connected in history and tradition to the Dene, Hikaria Apache, and the Tanoan tribes, as well as the mixed-race descendants of our detribalized and/or captive ancestors. Indigenous people are not relics of the past. We're still here, demonstrating our talents and gifts amidst a backdrop of ongoing colonialism and oppression. Land acknowledgement is only one small part of supporting indigenous communities, and hopefully, our statement will inspire you to stand with us in solidarity with indigenous people everywhere. Thank you.
Thanks, Tori. All right, so hi, I'm Warren. I want to talk a little bit about this project, and but first I need to ask a question. How many of you consider yourselves audio fiction listeners?
Me.
Whoa, really? I'm pretty surprised, because I found it to be pretty hard to get into the medium. And that's not to say I'm not a fan. I'm a huge fan of audio drama now. And to be clear, I'm not talking about audiobooks. I'm talking about fiction with scripts and casts. So can I see those hands again? A little less. Okay, so this is gonna sound like I'm ragging on my own thing that I'm doing, but I find it really hard to get into it. And so when I started in audio, I was in podcasts and radio and nonfiction, of course, because 99.9% of the audio space, as we call it, is nonfiction. I always thought that was super weird because movies and TV are dominated by fiction. Why would audio be any different? And why isn't audio fiction more popular? I think I've zeroed in on a few reasons. One, these are gonna sound pretty obvious. The sound is the whole thing, right? It's like, it's all you got. So these are always recorded in studios, super crisp and clean and just pristine sound through mics that are wonderful but don't sound anything like human hearing. And then they're affected with effects that are, aiming to emulate but do not exact what we hear every day. The second is the budgets, which, I think most people kind of think of it as like a throwaway genre. It's just a place where you can playtest ideas, and have fun, and that's great. I think that's great. You can have fun in this genre, but it doesn't make it super awesome for listener engagement. The third, and along those same lines, is performance. For actors working on an audio drama, the norm is you go in to a studio, you work for maybe a couple of days, and then you're done. Or you're working from your home studio. And usually that is not with the other actors. It makes for some really, really disjointed performances. I call it the uncanny valley, if you guys know what that means. But it's like just a disconnect that is not, it doesn't sound like the way humans have conversations. I'm sorry. So all that said, I found some shows that I really love that I think are getting past this, but I still think they are few and far between. And so a few years back, I started thinking more about, well, what if we can address essentially all of these issues? And I started thinking, well, let's get the actors together so they're able to play off of each other. Let's get them off book, like essentially every other single production, and let's get them out of the cold vacuum of the studio. And I was like, well, how are we going to do that? And I started thinking more about this term, binaural. And binaural basically just means if you're wearing headphones, it sounds like human hearing, like you're inside the head of the person who is generally like talking, or you're inside someone else's head. Then I started thinking like, well, what if you were inside the head of the main character, and how would you record that?
I think I know.
Who is that?
That's me, Georgie.
Is that George? Georgie, it's our sound person, Georgie. Woo! Georgie, come on down. Georgie Han, how are you?
Well, thank you.
What are you wearing?
Just the latest in immersive binaural recording technology.
What? Where are the mics?
Right here. On the side of my head. See, our bodies already have the infrastructure to make fantastic binaural recordings. And it's called your ears.
What's that on your hip? It's making a lot of lights.
It's the recorder, and since it's attached to my person, I can move freely and act in the scenes like TV or movies.
Even outside?
Oh, yes. I think I forgot something. gets windy here in New Mexico, these protect the ears.
Thank you so much, Georgie. Georgie, ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for a sound person, Georgie is the one. Okay, so, so our main protagonist of Eminent Domain had the unenviable task of wearing that rig through essentially the entire production. And luckily we found someone who made such an extraordinary commitment, Ama Zathora. Ama also memorized over 200 pages of dialogue, which is like memorizing a whole season of a TV show. And I think it's one of the more remarkable achievements of our show here. So I want to get a little bit into the story, but in order to do that, I have to introduce you guys to this guy. This is Michael Joshua Martinez. In 2005, I had a dream about 3 young New Mexican boys playing on the side of the highway under a tree, and they stumble across this weird device sticking out of the ground. And I thought about the dream all day, and kind of the story grew around it. And the funniest, smartest person I knew, who was also my best friend and my roommate, Michael Martinez, I told him about it later that day, and he thought it was a great idea. And so we kind of bounced the idea around, but we never thought we'd have a way to bring the story to life. Fast forward 13 years to 2017, and was my math right there? I don't know. I was well into my career in audio, and I was starting to listen to audio fiction, and I started thinking about the dream and that story. So I called Mike up, and we kind of picked up from where we left off, and we're just riffing on it. And a few months later, I was actually able to hire Mike to come to New Mexico, and we spent 6 10-hour days locked in an office together, just plotting out, story mapping, and nerding out about all the actual science we wanted to put into this thing, the science of sound. We were like, if this is going to be a production of sound, it should, in sci-fi, it should center around the science of acoustics and resonance. And so Mike flew back home. I talked to him a few more times on the phone, and then he was gone. So one of the last things he told me on the phone was how much he loved this story and how much he enjoyed working on it. And so I knew that I couldn't give up on it. And we took a big break. At this time, Morgan and I were working together. And after about a year, we started looking for a writer, someone who embodied the cultural aspects, the vibe, the tone of northern New Mexico, and could write. And we found that person in Victoriano, Cárdenas. Tori, do you want to get up here and take it from there?
Hey, I was in grad school when I started writing with Warren and Morgan, and I was outrageously busy all the time. But when I was able to work on the scripts and work with Warren, oops,
Yeah.
you got it. All right, yeah. There's a lot that you do as a student of literature to be able to go through documents and someone's writings, someone else's writings, and get their intention, get their thoughts behind it. And even though I'm not much of a scientist, this slide really scares me. I don't know what any of that means. Even though I'm not much of a scientist, going through Michael's documents and having Warren there with me telling me about the story, it's a little bit like Michael was there with us, writing still. So, I have an academic background in Western history and literature, and I grew up in Taos, around a lot of scary stories that you don't get in classrooms, right? Like El Cucuy and La Llorona and the Coco Man and like all these things that are either outside or under your bed, like waiting to eat you. My grandparents told me a lot of these stories because they'd grown up with them, and my mom took me a lot to the storytelling festival up in Taos, which has a lot of storytellers from all over the world, a whole bunch of different cultures and traditions, but not really any New Mexican storytellers telling New Mexican stories, right? I never heard anyone with my accent on that stage. And so I didn't have too many like tangible things that I could come back to for New Mexico folklore. But I did have this one book by Larry Torres, I'm sure. If you're a little bit into New Mexico folklore, you're familiar with his name. But he wrote a book called Los Cocos, and it's just all these scary Coco men that are out in New Mexico folklore. In the introduction, he talks a little bit about fear and how it's fear of the unknown that kind of drives us. These things that we're scared of, or things that we don't know too much about. And the whole time that we were writing this, I kept coming back to that idea, like these things that we're afraid of, scared of. The things that we're scared of are like things that are rooted in us really deeply, right? These things, maybe they weren't magic or evil or whatever, right? Like maybe it's phenomena that we just didn't have the means to measure, or maybe someone was doing things differently than we were. So these things that we're really afraid of, the fear of the unknown limits us. And so what I tried to do with Eminent Domain, and I think something that Loretta and I have in common especially, is getting through that horror or that fear to deconstruct it, to like pull it apart and figure out why we're so afraid of it in the first place, maybe so we can be a little less afraid. But just to keep you a little less scared, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Los Descarnados, and this is right from Larry Torres's book. Decorated crosses can be found along the sides of many roads and highways in the northern part of New Mexico. These are crosses that mark the spots where a person has died in a car wreck. Ordinarily, these are places of peace, but at certain times of the year, strange things can be seen near them. One may see shadows of people standing next to the crosses asking for a ride, and if motorists stop to help them, these unfleshed ones get into the car and then slowly dissolve away into nothing. Los Descarnados are the spirits of the dead who are trying to complete their journey, and for this reason, many drivers do not stop to help any person who may be standing within 30 feet of a cross. 33. So, if you see any glowing eyes on your way home tonight, you might not want to stop. Or maybe you do. It's your life. But I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to
Me.
someone who knows what's going on. Lauren.
I'll be that someone.
Oh, here's a picture of a Descarnado. The flesh is just dripping. That's straight from that book, right?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Ooh, wow, that's a big cross.
Oh, yeah.
Or is that a small Descarnado? Okay, well, we're gonna get into it. I will say a couple of things. If you haven't already, phones, let's turn them off. This is 40 minutes, so buckle up, get comfortable. We're gonna do something that I don't think anyone has done. We're gonna turn off all the lights. Okay, so Chris, if you would, let's kill the screen and the lights, please.
Exit signs will remain lit, don't worry.
Audible Originals presents Eminent Domain.